Welcome to Writer Spark Academy's Craft Chat. I'm Melissa Bourbon, and today we are talking about writing your bliss with the lovely Brooke Peterson. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and learn what it means to write what your heart wants to write rather than writing to the market. Hi everyone, I am Melissa Bourbon with Writer Spark Writing Academy, and today we are here with Brooke Peterson, who is the author of the Jericho Falls Mystery Series. She's got a brand new middle grade book to tell us about, and she is also the co-founder of the Clued in Mystery podcast, which is so cool. She's a big cozy mystery fan, and I'm so glad to welcome you here today, Brooke. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Melissa. And I want to tell you how honored I am to be on your show because compared to some of the other folks that you've interviewed, I'm definitely a newbie. So I am so super thrilled to be here.
Well, I'm thrilled that you are here. And I mean, you've got several books under your belt, and I think everybody has something to offer, to writers at all levels. And, that's kind of why I started this, was to tap into the writing community and, in a way give back, because when I started 15 years ago, my first book was published in 2008, and there just wasn't a lot of accessible information, and there wasn't a way to talk to authors and feel like you can give to aspiring writers that are out there and receive as an aspiring writer. And now, we have so many opportunities to do that. And so a lot of this is sort of a paying it forward, opportunity, that I wanted to do to give back to aspiring writers so they can, sort of jump the line a little bit or glean information that took me years and years to figure out.
I love that. I love that. And I have been blown away by how, I don't know if it's just as cozy mystery authors, but the community is really, really open. And, if you put out a question on Facebook or, you need some advice, like the other authors have been really welcoming to me. And I've found a really great group on Instagram as well. I have some Instagram friends that are all authors, and it's just a really welcoming group. And, I thank all of you who have kind of forged the way and that you're willing to pay it forward. It's a really kind community.
Oh, yeah, well, I agree. And there's some great people out there. And, social media, for all the negativity that we hear about it, there are some really great things about it. And a lot of that
Definitely.
is bringing people together.
Yeah. That's exactly how I met my co-host of the podcast. Actually, she invited me, so I guess I'm officially her co-host. Sarah and Stephen we met on Instagram and just kind of talked about, hey, I'd like to have a podcast, and hey, I would too. And so we started chatting over several months, just video chatting, and then slowly over time decided what we wanted the podcast to be about. And yes, it's a social media success story, which I was kind of one of those people that didn't do a lot, definitely don't do a lot personally. And so was really thrilled the way that that's turned out for me.
That's great. So how did you come up with the idea of honing in on cozy mysteries and going about getting the authors to be guests on your podcast and all of that? And, I'm super curious about that.
Yeah, so we actually do mystery, all subgenres of mystery.
Mhm.
The two of us write more on the cozy end of things. So we kind of have an affection for that, but we wanted to approach it from the standpoint of mystery lovers. Even though we both are authors, we wanted to approach it from kind of more the reader's standpoint and the fan standpoint, because that's where we started. That's what got us our start, was that we just loved the genre. And that too, like Sarah and I could sit and talk about mystery fiction for hours, and tropes and the way clues are planted and the TV adaptations from different books. And so we just thought, well, let's do it, because there's got to be other people who love to talk about mystery and as much as we do. And it gives our spouses a break from hearing us talk about it. We can talk to each other.
Yeah, that's true. I don't talk to my husband about any of it really, because I know he's like only half listening, and then he gives an idea. I'm like,
Totally.
no, that doesn't work. You're not listening with me. Well,
Totally.
the podcast is really fun, so I'm glad that you're doing that. I love so do you have an affinity for Agatha Christie? Because you do have the episode where you delve into her missing days and, things like
Yes.
that.
I am really, I came to Agatha a little later. Like a lot of those of us who write mystery read her when they were growing up, and I didn't.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why, but I was definitely in my adulthood when I started reading Agatha Christie. But her disappearance is so fascinating to me. And Sarah and I did do we've done several episodes just on her work and the way she writes and things like that. But then we did an episode on her disappearance, and that was a blast because it's such a mysterious thing, and it could be the plot of a novel in and of itself.
Okay, well, it is. Have you heard of the Christie affair that came out just this
Yes.
year? Yeah, and
Yes.
I read that, and that was so interesting because it is a fictionalized hypothesis about what might have happened during those missing days.
Exactly. Yes, and there have been a few films recently, and I can't think of the name of it at the moment, but PBS did a film, and it's really great. You can find it on their website. Same, like a theoretical of like what really happened during those missing days, and I think we'll never stop theorizing just because it's so fascinating. And she was so
Mhm,
quiet about it, which
mhm.
just kind of adds to the allure, I think.
Yeah, yeah. So interesting. All right, well, let's jump into our craft chat topic, which is writing your bliss or being inspired to write or to follow your heart, I guess, when you're writing. So,
Yeah.
when you say follow your bliss or write your bliss, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I was thinking that, I'm not too far out. I have a few books under my belt, but I'm not too far out from maybe where your students who are taking your cozy mystery class are. Like, I still feel like I'm learning, and I suppose we never really get over that. But
Definitely.
I feel like when you first get started out there, there's just this avalanche of advice. And there's as many different pieces of advice as there are authors because we all do it kind of our own way, but it can be really overwhelming. And so, one thing that I've kind of tried to take to heart and share with some of my other author friends is to do that, to follow your bliss and to figure out exactly the things that light you up and to follow that course and to not try not to compare yourself too much to what other people are doing or get too confused by all the shoulds and shouldn'ts. And I think that that really starts with even with the genre because I was a English lit major
Me too.
and studied, yeah. And so you probably know what I mean when genre fiction can kind of get a bad rap sometimes. And when I came out of college, I thought I was supposed to be writing something intellectual and, deep and meaningful or whatever. But what I really wanted to do was write genre mysteries, and that's what I liked to read. And so sometimes I think that we kind of overthink that. But you have to come to the point of knowing, this is my voice and this is what I love. And there's nothing wrong with writing entertaining fiction. And I happen to think that in mystery, especially, we still get a lot of messages and important themes. We deal with good and evil and the good guy prevailing, and those are important and thought provoking themes that come out even in genre fiction.
Oh, yeah, no, I agree. Genre fiction gets a very bad rap, and I think there's so many great things to be said about it. So it's really unfortunate, in some subgenres or genres, worse, are perceived worse than others,
Yeah. Hmm.
unfortunately. And then they seem to ebb and flow in popularity too. I think science fiction went through a great surge in the 80s and
Hmm.
90s and seems to be on a decline right now, maybe. And romance seems to always be up there, but there are different tropes and different types of romance and romantic suspense, goes up and down. And but you're right, they all of our books touch on themes that are just universal, that's what makes our books
Yeah.
so appealing and accessible at the same time.
Right, right. Yeah, I was reminded in a recent podcast episode, we study Charles Dickens as literature with a capital L, but he was writing genre fiction in his day, serialized fiction. Once a week, you got the next part of the story. And I was thinking, okay, Kindle Vella, come on.
Mhm. Yeah, right.
But now we look back, and his work is, I mean, fantastic and beautiful. Not to take anything away from it, but more so to just give credence to that we're just kind of carrying on that tradition, and it's not less than it's very important.
Well, yeah, and that's interesting because you also have genre fiction mystery writers who are taking the classics and turning them into genre
Good
mysteries,
point.
like
Mhm.
Heather Redmond, who writes the Charles Dickens mystery series. And
Yes.
then there's Amanda Flower, who has her new Emily Dickinson mystery series. So it's almost like you're some authors are able to take that idea, these classics, and make them accessible and introduce them to a new generation in a new way by bringing them into their genre fiction, which I think is very clever. And,
Yeah, that's a great point. Mhm. Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah.
so following your bliss led you to write the Jericho Falls series. So tell us a little bit about that, and then how your philosophy of doing what you want to do and kind of ignoring some of the rules and the naysayers, and maybe following the market, ignoring some of that, led you to Jericho Falls.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So sometimes I think that we see, you're like, okay, I'm going to do a cozy mystery. And you start looking at what's really popular. And, sometimes it's witches or cats or, bakeries, whatever. Um, and the idea is to jump onto that thing because it's popular. And sometimes it works. But I think that when we gravitate towards something that we are already kind of crazy about, that it
Mhm.
really shines through, that thing that you geek out on all the time. And that's kind of what I did because I love the old, the gold rush days. And then the towns now that exist, for instance, like Virginia City, Nevada, or Tombstone, Arizona, these ghost towns that remain today that were big gold mining towns. And so that's where I love it. I love watching documentaries about them. I love watching film set in that time period, either historic or then now that's set in those ghost town places, ghost hunters, all that stuff.
Mhm.
So that's where I decided to set my cozy mystery. And I feel like when you do that, for someone else, it might be the beach or even the mall. I think a cozy mystery series set in a mall would be really fun.
Yeah, that would be a dying mall, a ghost town of a mall.
Yeah, there we go. Um, but when you already have this thing that you're kind of crazy of learning about, then it just really shines through, and you can inform your narrative so much more. You don't have to work as hard because you already kind of know all these tidbits that are kind of in the back of your brain. And
Mhm.
so that's kind of what led me to set my cozy mysteries there. And my sister and I had taken a trip to Virginia City not too long before I started it, and I'm like, this is it. This is what I'm going to do.
That's really cool. Yeah, so my most recent series is the Book Magic series, and it's set on the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Always had an affinity for the
Yes.
Carolinas. I was born and raised in California, moved to Texas, and now we're here and love it and hope never to move again. But yeah, I'm just drawn to the Outer
Mhm.
Banks. And so that was following my bliss right there, that I set the
Yeah.
series there. And then I have this huge Irish curse, Irish history, Irish mythology component, which is another thing I just love and interested in. And, so bringing that in was simply because I loved it, because I
So
wanted to
cool.
write about that. So it's so true. And I think it just adds a spark to what
Yeah.
we write when we have that passion versus, oh, I know a bread shop. Oh, well, no, I won't use that because I write a bread shop series. Well, I know a knitting shop, is popular. I'm going to write about a knitting shop, but I've never picked up knitting needles in my life. Well, we're not, I think it's going to lack the spark most likely.
Yeah. It's gonna show. The readers are gonna be able to tell, and maybe they won't be able to put their finger on it, but it will just lack that depth than if you would have picked something that you're just really into anyway.
Yeah, that's such a great point. So you've got the three Jericho Falls mysteries right now, and in spring of next year, you have a brand new middle grade book coming out.
Yeah.
So
Mm.
tell us about how you are broadening what you're writing from adult cozy mysteries to this middle grade series now. More
So
following your Bliss.
yeah, more. Yeah. Well, it's really interesting because actually I wrote the middle grade first. And it was just sitting. I wrote it quite a while ago and it was just sitting. And again, another Instagram uh, meetup, I
Mhm.
connected with an agent through Instagram who's opening a new agency and accepting. And I thought, well, because my Jericho Falls is a indie
Mhm.
uh, series, and I thought, well, what the heck? I'll try that. Marketing a middle grade series is really different. You've got a
Yeah.
completely different, even though it's mystery, it's a different group that I'm going to be marketing to. And I thought, well, I wouldn't mind having that help. And so I signed with Birch Literary
Mhm.
and was able
Congratulations.
to, thank you, and sold a 3-book deal to Level Best Books. So the first book is called The Cameo Secret, and it comes out in spring of 2023. So I'm really excited about that. And then there'll be 2 more adventures with these middle school aged sleuths. So,
Sleuths, how fun.
yeah.
So is there a history? So Cameo to me immediately speaks of history. So is there some sort of history component?
Yes, absolutely. It is set in the main character has to move back to her family moves back to the town where her mom grew up, and she starts to unravel this big family secret, and that's been very hush hush for decades. But she is a compulsive snoop. She just can't help herself, and before she knows it, she has opened up the whole can of worms, and then has kind of created some hot water that she has to solve it in order to kind of keep everybody safe. So
So is she sort of a contemporary Nancy Drew, or who would you liken her to?
yeah, I think that's probably pretty good. Her name is Jessica Johnstone, but please call her Jessie. She's pretty tomboy. She's no nonsense, and she gets a kind of a friend that you wouldn't expect for her to become best friends with in this new town. So
That's
then they'll be the partners as the series continues to solve some more mysteries.
so that sounds super fun. So what led you to, even if it was the first book that you wrote, what led you to middle grade specifically? Was that just, where you were initially drawn to with your writing? And then given that that came first, what led you to your adult mysteries?
Yeah. So I live in a really rural area, so there aren't a lot of writing groups or, classes, but there was an adult ed class for children's lit. And
Mhm.
so as part of that class, I decided that, well, if I'm going to write, I have to write a mystery. That just was kind of what wants to come out. And so
Yeah, that was my process too.
whether I want to or not, that's what happens.
Yeah.
So, so I started writing the middle grade because, so in the town that I grew up in, I still live in, my great grandparents and my grandparents and my parents and myself, and eventually my daughter, but she wasn't born at the time, all went to school in the same middle school. It's, this
Wow.
gigantic brick building with the big tall stairs. And um, the it's one of those buildings that just kind of I don't want to use the word haunt because that seems like it's negative, but it's just always in my mind,
Mhm.
and it's no longer standing. It had to be torn down. And so sometimes I, like kind of walk the halls in my imagination. And it
Mhm.
was just one of those buildings I just couldn't get out of my head. And I knew I wanted to write about kids who were going to school in that building and solving a mystery. So
So is it that actual building in your actual town, or is it a fictional building that's modeled after that building?
exactly. It's all fictional, but,
Mhm.
like in my brain when I'm
Yeah.
writing it, that's the hall those are the halls that I'm in. But no, it's a fictional town and a, fictional building.
Wow. Okay, that's really cool. So, following your bliss. So, what is there a process that you go through when you're trying to think about, okay, well, what do I want to do now? And do you battle at all with sort of internally with what you want to do versus what you think you should do based on, wanting to have a publishing career or a successful publishing career, which is so difficult to
Mhm.
have, as you know?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and I think probably the one that gets sticks with me the most is the speed at which we publish.
Mhm.
And I
Especially in the
always
indie world.
yes, in the
Yeah.
indie world for sure. You know, fast fast writing and fast publishing is the name of the game right now in this digital era when it's possible.
Mhm.
And it's not me, that's not something that I'm gifted with.
Mhm.
I think it's great the people who can do it, but it's not something that I have. And
Mhm.
so coming to terms with that, I mean, that's part of finding your sweet spot and just really having to come to terms with the fact that, I'm not going to be the one churning out a book every month, probably not
Mhm.
even a book every 6 months. That would be my dream is to
Yeah.
get to 6 months.
Yeah.
Um, but I also do fully believe that fast writers and slow writers can be successful, but I think that you have to be consistent. So if you have trained your audience, so to speak, that you're
Mhm.
going to give them a book every 6 months, then you need to do that. If it's every year, then you need to do that. And I think that if you're writing things that people enjoy, that they'll get used to that. I know you are traditionally published, and it's about a book a year. Is that right?
Yeah, my last book, it's been more like a year and a half because they've had, well, this is the story I got anyway. They had a lot of success with cozy mysteries, and they decided to pare down on what they were releasing every month so that they weren't cannibalizing their own sales,
Mm,
and so they spread out their release schedule. So the 8th book in my traditionally published series is coming out a year and a half
mm,
later, which to me doesn't make a lot of sense at all. And, but on the other hand, I do have an indie series too. And, the control that you have is great.
yeah,
I don't want to give up traditional publishing quite yet because I like having those traditionally published books, but I do like the control that we have every step of the way in the
yeah,
indie process. So that's a battle I go through in terms of following my bliss. I don't know. I mean, I have a lot of joy and a lot of satisfaction with my traditional series. And
mhm,
so, that's one path, but I also love so much about my indie series. I don't know if I want to give both up. So, that's a little bit of a struggle in terms of, well, what do I really want and what is really going to propel me, in my
exactly.
career? It's
Yeah.
hard. Sometimes it's hard.
It is hard, and it's a moving target too, you know,
Mhm.
and what you find, there's seasons of life, so what you find is your bliss right now might be different when your kids grow up or, when whatever your circumstance is.
Right.
So that's always something that you can be judging, but I just really fall back on if we can move towards the decisions that feel best to us and not the things that kind of create that stress, that we're going to be happier and we're going to write better. And I really do think that it shines through in our work.
I agree. I mean, I think that, as you pointed out earlier, I think that readers might not be able to put their finger on what it is about a book that really resonates or a book that doesn't. But I bet that a lot of it comes down to the passion that the author brings to that
Yeah,
subject versus just churning something out because it's part of the career. It's the next, thing that I need to do in order to move on, versus writing something I really, really love. I think it's a fine line.
I agree. Hmm.
So, before we wrap up, do you think you could dial into maybe 3 tips or so to give to our viewers about how to follow your bliss within the publishing world, whether you're traditionally published or aiming for traditionally published contracts, or whether you are indie published or aiming to indie publish. Just a couple of tips to help people stay the course and be true to
Yeah,
themselves.
yeah. One thing that I really like doing is making a list every so often of those things, like I said, that kind of light you up. Like, what are the things that I just love to think about or love to look at pictures of or whatever. So if you can make a list of that every so often, and that's going to be maybe those things that you want to incorporate in your writing. Um, and then as far as like, I think it's important, and maybe this comes back to just maybe my overall tip is journaling, because then I was going to say, then, every once in a while, I really like to sit down and write about like, what are my priorities? What is really my priority? Because sometimes I feel like I'm not accomplishing as much in my writing career as I want to. And I start to beat up on myself. And then I realize, right now, my biggest priority is being a mom, and I have just a few years left with our daughter is in high school now, so it's not going to be long, and this part is going to just slip away. So,
Yeah.
let's, journal about what your real priorities are, so that if those timelines need to slow down, you remember why. I think that we can get a lot of good information if we just kind of write that out and look at what's really going on inside, and then follow that and know, like I said, it's going to change in a couple years. uh, this is a good example, Melissa, because I would have said a year ago, I'm never going to be on camera, that's too scary for me. But as you grow and you're like, okay, I'm ready to try that next thing, that's not so bad anymore.
Yeah, no, I've been there too. I would say a couple of years ago, I would be like, no way am I going to be hosting people and interviewing them on camera. And, I remember 15 years ago prepping for my first audio interview and how stressful and nervous I was. And
I
now
know.
it's like, oh, yeah, okay, no
That's so
problem.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically it boils down to a lot of self-reflection
Mhm.
and trying to understand really who you are at this point in time and what you want and how those things work together.
Yeah, I think so. I do. I definitely think that that helps a lot. Um, and again, and recognizing that maybe what you're not doing now, it's going to come in the future, and just keep growing. That's the same with the speed of my writing, and the speed of everyone's writing. If you wish you were producing more, the way to do that is to keep writing, and you get
Right.
better and better over time. So
Yeah, yeah, and manifest, right? If I really want that publishing, career to be successful, and then also to define what does success mean to you,
absolutely.
right? Because you might say, "Well, I want to be successful," and in your mind, that means something completely different to, just to me or to somebody else. And so how do you follow your bliss if you don't even know, what that means to you and what it is you want from
Yeah,
this
that's it.
process?
That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. So fun, so interesting. It's such an abstract concept, right? But there are things that we can do to kind of hone in and figure out what is going to make us happy in this industry that is so fraught with frustrations, a
Yeah.
lot of the time.
And
And
things
we're
change
juggling
so
and
quickly.
mhm,
Next year there will be avenues of marketing or avenues of income that we don't even have today. Like it's a constantly moving target.
mhm.
So we just have to constantly be looking at, what's going to be the best for us individuals.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think embrace the things that you gravitate towards, and as you said, that um, that work for you, understanding yourself. Because, when TikTok first came out, I was like, no, no way. I just can't do it, and just the whole idea overwhelmed me. And now I've started a TikTok channel,
Yeah.
because the time is right. I'm at the point where, okay, I can dip my toe in there and be okay with it. Whereas a year ago, there was no way. You know,
Yeah,
a year ago you couldn't have
exactly.
been on camera and now you are. So it is this moving target, like you said, and it is growing comfortable in your own skin and then understanding what you want, what you're able to do, and how these things can, work together.
Exactly. Yeah. That's great.
Cool. Well, so what is next for you? So you've got the Cameo. What's the title of the book again?
The Cameo Secret.
So Cameo Secret's coming in spring, and what
Yes.
else do you have in the pipeline?
So I'm currently working there are 2 Jericho Falls novels and 1 novella, and I'm currently working on the 3rd, novel. So that I'm hoping will I'm shooting for perhaps a spring release of that as well, but, that's my indie title, so I like you said, I get to kinda, do that as it fits in, but
Mhm.
I do have people asking for it, so that makes me really happy, so it's inspiring me to keep going.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
And then you have 2 more books in the middle grade mystery series that you'll be working on over the next year and a half, 2 years?
Yes, they're set to come out spring of 23, 24, and 25. So we'll
Okay.
see if that timeline holds.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being here, Brooke Peterson. I appreciate it and all your tips on following your bliss, writing your bliss, because I think it's so important that we remember how to stay happy and true to ourselves in this industry. So
I
thank you for
agree.
that.
Thank you so much for having me, Melissa. This was so much fun.
Great. Well, thank you for being here, and we will see you next time, everyone.